could be wiser as an educated advisor? Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money-colored commentator. On today's show, protection against market losses and taxation, part 5 in our series on index universal life insurance. All here on Let's Get Down to Business. Again, just for my compliance sake, so everybody says I actually said this on air, the withdrawals of basis and the collateralized policy loans of gain from a TAMRA compliant contract kept in force on the policy insured are distributed as tax-free income. Just think about it, not only tax-free, but never showing up on your Social Security provisional income test. When I'm managing the cost of insurance, I'm going to determine the contribution amount. Hey, the client wants to give me 10 grand. How long are you going to give to me? Oh, to age 65. Once I find that out, then I'm going to go to the husband and the wife and find out who's got the smallest cost of insurance based on their health classification. 90% of the time, it's going to be the female. So I don't care about who it goes on. I just want the lowest cost of insurance. So I'm going to select the gender. I'm going to select the lowest cost of insurance. And what happens when mom and dad both have impairments or medical issues? I might go down to the next generation for a daughter or a son to use them as a surrogate. They're there only to be the policy insured. Mom and dad still can control, pay the premiums, all that is right, all there. So you could have to use surrogate insured. Just remember, you have to be able to go to the company and prove financial justification. Generally, that's not a problem. I'm going to either use, again, the guideline annual or the cash value accumulated test to find out what's the best cash accumulation, and that's what I'm using. Depending upon how long I'm paying the premium, should I use level death benefit? Should I use increasing death benefit? For you who are marketers and do illustrations, proposals, you already know what I'm talking about. But for you that don't know, you say, well, why are we caring about if it's level or increasing? It all has to do with the cost of insurance. So remember, all these things help us manage that cost. The lower the cost we can under the TAMRA provisions, the better the contract is. And of course, we're reducing the death benefit and option switching on or before, if the contract lets us, before the distributions take place. Now, you've heard of these two kind of yin and yang about policies. Every policy that you look at has current company practice, and then when you go into the actual policy or contract itself, it has contractual imperatives. So those guarantees and current company practice, they're like day and night sometimes with some carriers. The smaller space between current company practice and contractual guarantees, the smaller it is, the more I like it, because it has some embedded value. Because the actuaries are actually pricing it pretty close to what their current is. That gives me a little bit of peace of mind. And then, of course, I might be able to choose, if I'm going to take my money out, I'm going to have to choose, in some cases, especially IUL, am I going to use a fixed rate or am I going to use a variable rate? And remember, a lot of these contracts let you choose that issue every single year. Now, there's zero net cost loans, wash loans, spread loans, direct recognition loans, participating loans, the arbitrage loans we use in IUL. Check it out. There's only one carrier left that I'm aware of that uses zero net cost loans, which is the charging and crediting of the same rate, about 60 to maybe 80, 90 days apart. And a wash loan is the charging and crediting of the same rate a whole year apart, 365 days. And a spread loan is a different rate. Maybe you're charging one rate and you're crediting the other, but there's a differential in the actual, maybe it's 2%, maybe it's 1%. And then that crediting and charging is happening, again, 365 days, separate events. And then direct recognition loans are spread loans and direct recognition loans. Direct recognition loans are the lowering of the debit and credit to the whole life policy and then charging the actual policy loan. So that's kind of punitive. Most people are pulling away from direct recognition loans just from the distribution point of view. But I leave it to you to make your decision on what carrier you're going to use. And of course, participating loans, what happens when your index performs and gives you 8%? Wow, it's like great. And your loan value is 5. Now you're loaning money to yourself and making money on the loan. You're not only making money on the S&P 500, you're making as an indice. Now you're making money on the actual loan. But heads up, we all have loser years. 2018, for the most part, for index was not a good year. So if you were taking money out in 2018, I'm not going to take a loan out if I have basis. If I have access to basis, it costs me nothing to take my withdrawals out. I'm doing it. So just keep in mind, there are times and terms for that. Now, everybody has always asked me, what's the 100% probability rate that I'm going to get whatever rate or whatever return I'm going to get? Well, we're in the market, so the word guarantee is not going to be there. So I use the word probability. What can I think about? Well, most of these contracts were built to perform about 200 basis points above whatever the carrier is making in their bond portfolio. So they're making 4%. They're really built this product to be about 6, 6.25% higher than that. And AG 49 regulations, every carrier has to obey their AG 49 look-back number, and they're going to say you can't illustrate past 7% or 7.25% or 7.5%. The days of doing what we want or showing double digits, all those days are over. And this is just a very quick line that shows they're using two 20-year tranches. So they look at that. There's about 280 different segments into this. And when I look at this, the 100% probability rate of getting 5.5. Now that's really close to participating whole life. So if you said 5.5 is good for me, you need to look at both of them. But the higher up the food chain I hear, notice in the wheelhouse, what we call the wheelhouse of returns, 7.5%, that's 87%. Is it 87%? Yeah, 82%. 82% probability that I'm going to hit 7.5%. That's a pretty good probability. So people say, hey, I think that's great. I think I'd rather go to indexing because I have a higher probability of return. This is what they call the lost decade from 2001 till 2010. And it was brutal, I have to say. I remember when one of my children came in, they started their 401k, they just got out of college, they're 21 years old, they're looking at their 401k for the first 3 years. Look at these 3 years here. There are 3 straight years of loser. He goes, I just got into the business, and everything I throw into my 401k has already lost double-digit compounded. That would be so distressful if you're just coming out of college. That was a really bad 10 years, especially for newbies in the market, people coming into the job market. It was just a hard issue. Look at what happened here, the rate of return from the actual line. When you look at this, the total loss over that period of time, some recovery, was still negative 24.05%. Now, most people that were in indexing, and this chart does not include dividends, so I'm being very honest, the actual chart says that we made 63.32 or 6.3%. But remember, expense loads have not been taken out yet. Most contracts that were not managed lost money. My contracts probably made a point and a half. It was a bad 10 years, right? But we still were able to recover because we do things differently in the treatment of IUL, where we're hedging against losses and we get to hold the value. It doesn't go back down. That becomes our new threshold of value that we use our calculations for. Remember, there's two sides of the balance sheet here. I don't credit anything less than 0 on an IUL, but I still have bills to pay. So your client could receive an annual statement that says, oh, you didn't make anything this year. Great, I didn't want to lose anything either. That's great. But I still had bills to pay. And whatever expense loads on your cost of insurance, policy fee, premium loads, if any of those expenses are going to come at the bottom end. And if you made 0, you may actually be down 2-3% depending upon the cost of the policy. So keep in mind, 0 isn't your hero. It isn't. 0 is only one part of the equation. It's the crediting account side. I still have to pay bills. Lastly, there are so many ways you can buy the S&P 500. You can buy options. It's taxable. It pays dividends if you hold on to it once you convert the option, hold on to it long enough. But it has beta risk, right? If the market tanks, you're going to pay for it, right? You're part of the market equation. You could lose money. Mutual funds, I get dividend payments. I also get that's also taxed. And remember, the longer I hold it, it may not be ordinary income tax, it may be capital gain tax. But it still has beta risk, right? I could lose my money. ETFs, the same way. I could experience dividends. It is a taxable event. Again, not knowing if it's going to be ordinary income tax or capital gains until we go ahead and make constructive receipt. But I have beta risk to it. When I start moving away from beta risk is when I walk into fixed indexed annuities. No dividends, sorry, none there. And it's tax deferred. It's going to be taxed eventually, but not today. It's being deferred or pushed into the future or delayed. My risk is only if I'm buying an income rider that costs money and there's no way to recapture that cost within the contract. So just be advised, if you didn't use an income rider, the odds are you probably don't have any expenses to this. So that's a pretty good deal. And then IUL, Index Universal Life, pays no dividends. It's tax-free, but keep in mind, yes, we have a good hedge position. We'll never credit more than or less than 0, but I have bills to pay in that year, and so I still may have a negative account because of the expense loads. And then VUL, they give dividends, full dividends of the S&P, tax-free, but most VULs, there's a few exceptions to what I'm about to say, most of them are exposed to the market like anything else. So they could lose money, they could have losses.
So you want to make sure that you're choosing on the S&P 500. People always say, hey, if I'm going to do that, they call it the poor man's portfolio. Most people who don't know what they're doing in the market buy this. Think about it. Warren Buffett even says right now he can't beat that. He looks at indices all the time because he thinks they're a better deal and better probability on profitability. Remember, done correctly, it's almost unbeatable. Done incorrectly, it's almost always indefensible. I'm Steve Savant. I'm just walking through some of the things for my marketers and our salespeople that will help them. These are support items that you should know. It just makes our IUL sales that much more glamorous. And by the way, from a mathematical point of view, that much more greater internal rate of return for our clients.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this series on Index Universal Life Insurance. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, or your compliance officer. And don't forget, you can subscribe to my consumer show, Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game. Daily content that you can post on your website, social media accounts, and database distribution. I'm Steve Savant. Thanks for watching.